It is undeniable that shipping is a massive appeal of fandom spaces. Every fandom in existence, no matter how niche or small the fandom is, will have at least one ship. It is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And of course, the actual landscape of shipping is completely complicated. Some fandoms have it better than others, to say the least. Some fandoms are actually pretty chill and for the most part largely agree in terms of what ships they enjoy. Some fandoms, however, have become notorious for how intense their shipping spaces are. Now, the reason why shipping results in this is a topic for its own entire video, but regardless, shipping is always going to be an important part of fandom culture. However, one phenomenon I often see occurring in fandom spaces is the prominence of ships that aren't at all canon. Ships that spawn purely off of fans' interpretation of the characters with no proof from the text. These ships arise for a variety of reasons, and sometimes they can be just as notable as mainstream ships. These kinds of ships fascinate me greatly, so today I plan to discuss the how and why of non-canon ships. To start, let's discuss some terminology. A term often used to describe non-canon ships is rarepairs. Rarepairs are, to put it very simply, pairs that are rare in fandoms. They are ships that, while often having a following, are extremely niche followings. In some cases, fans might not even know these ships exist for a while. It's not impossible for rarepairs to become canon, but it is extremely unlikely. Now, why a ship is considered a rare pair is different from ship to ship. Some ships are rare because the characters are unpopular, some ships are rare because the characters barely or have never interacted, some ships are rare because of the sheer prominence of other ships in the fandom, the reasons go on. What counts as a rare pair is dependent from fandom to fandom due to a variety of factors such as cast sizes, character popularities, what ships are popular, and more. Given some of the ships we will discuss today, it is important to analyze every fandom we come across to see what truly counts as a rare pair in that specific fandom. In fandom discussions, I often see rare pairs questioned on the basis of their existence alone. I'm sure many rare pair shippers can probably think of a time they were questioned on why they shipped something that was not canon or canonically implied. And it could be argued that this kind of fundamental disagreement on what should be shipped is one of the many reasons shipping is so contentious in any and all fandoms. In any large community, it is guaranteed there will be disagreements. This is just a fact. In the case of shipping, however, it is a whole mess. Some view shipping more casually, something a person just goes along with as the story implies it. Other people take it much more personally, becoming deeply invested in the characters and their relationships. And oftentimes, in situations where a fan becomes deeply interested in a character and their story, many fans begin to project their own ideas onto these characters and play with the different character dynamics. To a lot of fans, their favorite rare pair makes much more sense for a character than a popular ship involving the same character, but not everyone feels that way. And that is just a natural element of fandoms. These kinds of disagreements are pretty normal. But in many cases, however, I think non-shippers just don't understand how rare pairs function. Of course, not every non-canon ship is a rare pair. In a lot of fandoms, the most popular ship or ships in the fan base are non-canon ships. These ships may be heavily implied, they may be shipped by a massive majority, but they still aren't canon for one reason or another. The characters may eventually get together in the cases where the fandom is for an ongoing story, but that's not a guarantee. And we will talk about certain examples a bit later in the video. Another term that fits into this discussion is crack ship. A crack ship is essentially a joke ship, a purposefully ridiculous ship. Some crack ships are between characters in the same franchise, but a lot of crack ships are crossover ships. Many people who create crack ships are completely aware of how ridiculous their ship is, but stick with it for the bit. Though I have seen a few crack ships become unironic. The number one rule in life is doing something ironically is the gateway to doing it for real. A common idea about hardcore shippers that I see in a lot of fandoms is that shippers will just pair any two random characters together with no thought process behind it at all. If they see two characters have one scene together, they will ship it. If they see two characters exist at all, even without ever interacting, they'll ship it. But as an avid shipper myself who has been in many fandoms, I think this is an unfair belief. In a lot of cases, non-canon niche rare pairs exist in either one of two categories. Either it is just a hypothetical someone came up with based on an underutilized dynamic they think could be fun if expanded on, or the shipper has done genuine serious analysis of the characters and truly believes it could work out if expanded. And in some cases, the shipper is aware that these ships are ridiculous. In that case, it would fall under crack ship territory. These explanations aren't always the case, of course, but they are a common mentality that I see expressed in fandom spaces. In my case, I'm somewhere in the middle of a canon/mainstream shipper and also a rare pair shipper. I have enjoyed a lot of ships that either became canon or were canon from the start, and I have also enjoyed a lot of ships that, while not canon, were extremely mainstream in the fandom. But I have also enjoyed a lot of niche ships that only a handful of other fans agreed upon. I tend to not think too much about the canon factor of a ship, rather I just ship what I like. Even if my ships aren't actually canon, that doesn't stop me from drawing fan art. But, of course, this is relevant to another reason many in fandom are so wary of non-canon ships, and that is the fact that some shippers really do care about the canonicity, and I mean really, really care about the canonicity, in some cases to a admittedly ridiculous degree. I'm sure many in fandom spaces have heard horror stories of shippers who were so passionate to a, for lack of a better word, toxic degree. There are stories like this for both popular ships and unpopular ships. Hell, I myself have a funny story about this kind of thing. In high school, I was yelled at in real life for not shipping Totodeku, a ship from the My Hero Academia fandom. And while it was a very, very popular ship, it's not canon. These kinds of stories have heavily impacted how shippers are viewed by those who hate shipping. Of course, though, I don't think I need to explain that this is not descriptive of every shipper ever, especially in cases where a fandom is extremely massive and a ship is extremely popular. Fandoms are melting pots of all kinds of people who usually only interact because of a mutual interest in a piece of media. You can never predict what might happen as a result of this, but you can analyze it and study it, so that's what I'll be doing now. So the way non-canon ships work and operate is a case-by-case basis. Oftentimes, this is dependent on the size of the cast. In fandoms with a lot of characters, they often serve to experiment with the often unexplored potential of those characters by pairing characters who could have interesting dynamics. Larger casts means you can be as creative and wild with ships as you want, so many fans view shipping as kind of a sandbox for fanon content. A really good example of this is the Sonic the Hedgehog fandom. Considering I made a 40-minute video about Sonic the Hedgehog ships, it's unsurprising that I have opinions about this. Sonic is a franchise with an absurd amount of characters when you take into account the variety of media associated with the franchise. You have the cast of the games, various characters who only appear primarily in one game. You have the handful of characters original to the IDW comics, as well as the handful of characters from the various cartoons. Then you have the really obscure characters from the Fleetway comics, and then you have the hundreds of original Archie comic characters. My point being, there is a lot of Sonic characters. And of course, Sonic is notorious for its shipping issues, but I think it makes sense when you take into account the amount of possible ships that exist in the community. This also isn't helped by the fact that very few ships are actually anywhere close to canon compliant, and that includes the really popular ones. Sonali was canon for a bit in the Archie comics, but that whole thing was a mess. Sonami has clear interest from one side, but the other side isn't as clear. Naksuj is a very flirty rivalry, but it's probably going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. Wispangle is currently languishing in Mandate Hell. Tails Mo is a doomed relationship because Cosmo died, and I have no idea where Stobotnik stands. Many Sonic fans have kind of accepted the fact that the main major Sonic characters, such as Sonic himself, likely will never enter long-term relationships. There's many reasons for this, and it does happen in quite a few other ongoing franchises. It would be a massive upheaval of the status quo depending on which characters get together in this hypothetical. There's the possibility for fan backlash. If it becomes canon in the games, it would probably also affect spin-off material like the comics and cartoons, which are made by different people who would then have to work that into the specific continuity, and of course, the mandates. But none of this affects fan art and fanfiction. Fanon entirely exists to make your own content with these beloved characters for the enjoyment of yourself and your fellow fans, and that includes content that completely disregards canon restraints. We don't need canon confirmation to enjoy and make content regarding these ships. But of course, as previously mentioned, Sonic has a lot of characters, and maybe you don't care for any of the canon ships I listed off. Maybe you're more interested in a more obscure ship, maybe a pair that's a little rare? If that's the case, you've got a wide variety of ships to choose from in the Sonic fandom. In my aforementioned video, I honestly couldn't even scratch the surface of the sheer amount of rare pairs that exist in the fandom. ranging from rare pairs that are slowly gaining more relevance and popularity to ships between characters that never have but could interact in a hypothetically interesting way to completely off-the-wall crack ships. Sonic has it all. I've noticed in recent years rare pairs have become significantly more accepted and treated seriously by fans, once fans began to stop focusing on what was canon. For example, I'm sure many Sonic fans are aware of the big ship war between Sonami and Sonali, or more accurately, the formerly big ship war. In recent years, the intensity of this debate has greatly died down. I think this is partially thanks to Amy's character development and Sally not really being currently relevant, and while I can guarantee you can still find remnants of the ship war out there online because time is a flat fucking circle, the decreasing intensity I think has resulted in more nuanced perspectives of ships in the Sonic fandom. In recent years, many more Sonic, Amy, and Sally ships have greatly gained popularity and acceptance, such as Sonato, Sonaze, Blaze-Amy, Meta-Amy, and Salicol. With how many characters exist in the Sonic world, I think it's safe to say there will be at least one ship you enjoy no matter how obscure. Cookie Run is also a franchise that falls into this category, considering there are over 100 characters, with that number still growing. Now, overall, in terms of their ship scenes, I would say Sonic and Cookie Run are actually pretty comparable. There are characters that fans can point to that are very clearly romantically coded, such as Sea Fairy Cookie and Moonlight Cookie, or Mint Choco Cookie and Cocoa Cookie. But because of how many stories and characters exist in this world simultaneously, there are a lot of ships. Some of these ships feature characters who regularly interact or are associated together, like Espresso Line, Almond Latte, Chili Rye, Pure Lily, Red Pastry, or any combination of ships between the Juice Bar regulars. Then you have ships between characters with no interaction in-game, like Licorice Cookie and Parfait Cookie. This ship is decently popular despite the fact these characters in question have no canon connections. My guess as to why this ship took off is due to the contrasting aesthetics. Licorice Cookie looks like a cartoon villain, in the sense that you look at him and can immediately tell that he's one of the bad guys, while Parfait Cookie's design, aesthetic, and personality is overwhelmingly sweet. Opposites attract is a pretty popular trope for a reason. However, Cookie Run is in a pretty similar situation to Sonic, where it would be hard to have canon ships due to the nature of it being an ongoing, constantly updating game series with no end in sight. There are also over 100 characters currently being juggled, with at least 2 new ones each month, so I can't really blame Dev Sisters for not canonizing these ships. Either way, fanon has definitely taken over. The Sonic and Cookie Run franchises are situations where, due to the large cast size, fans can create as many ships as they want and experiment with the possible dynamics. But Sonic is also a massive pop culture franchise that has existed for over 30 years, and Cookie Run has at least one new character released every month. What about franchises that have smaller casts? Well, I noticed that fandoms with more limited cast sizes tend to have less intense shipping debates, largely due to a lack of real options. Of course, rare pairs in these fandoms exist, but it is common for 1, maybe 2 ships to really stand out. An example of this situation would be Splatoon. Splatoon has a very small number of named characters and an even tinier number of named characters that actually impact the plot significantly. Sure, there's the shopkeepers, but they barely get any attention, and the manga's original characters are obscure enough to not get much fan content, but there is one ship in the fandom that a large majority of people agree upon. A ship that basically defines the Splatoon shipping scene. I am, of course, talking about Pearl and Marina, aka Pearlina. It is honestly hard to put into words how popular this ship is. They embody many beloved tropes like the sun and moon gaze and red and blue, or I guess pink and blue gaze, and they already kind of act like a married couple. It is extremely easy to see why this ship is so beloved, especially when you take into account their interactions in the Octo expansion, and the ship is undoubtedly the main ship in the fandom. And while it technically is not canon, that absolutely has not stopped the fandom. However, it is of course not the only ship in the franchise. Arguably, the second most popular ship is Agent 24, which is the ship between Agent 3, specifically Splatoon 1 Agent 3, who is now known as the Captain, I need to clarify this, and Agent 8. This ship is pretty fascinating because it is entirely dependent on each respective artist and writer as to how it plays out. Both characters in the ship are player insert characters, meaning everything about them is up to your own interpretation. This means that there is essentially no one way to ship these two, so it's the perfect opportunity to project as many headcanons as you want. Despite the lack of major characters though, Splatoon does have rare pairs that have recently gained popularity. A notable rare pair is DJ Deadfish and Agent 8. In my AU video, I discussed how the Tumblr ass blog 14 Crush hinted at the ship, which caused many other fans to grow attached to it. Though, considering the fact that not even 24 hours after I posted that video, a Nintendo Direct revealed that DJ Deadfish would have a major speaking role in the next DLC, it is entirely possible the ship will gain a boost in popularity in the next few months. And in a similar vein of Splatoon rare pairs gaining popularity due to fan comics, Cuddletavio! That being the ship between Captain Cuttlefish and DJ Octavio. While these two canonically have history, formerly being friends prior to the Great Turf War, they are enemies by the time we see them in the games. But a fan comic on Tapas known as Dissonant Melody, which follows the story of Cuttlefish and Octavio during the years of their friendship, became extremely popular in the fandom. So much so that Cuttlefish and Octavio coincidentally became a much more common ship after the comic gained this popularity. And much like Deadfish and Agent 8 being heavily associated with 14 Crush, Cuddletavio is heavily associated with Dissonant Melody. Both of these ships are examples of ships very much influenced by fanon content. Another fandom in this kind of situation is Madness Combat. Easily the biggest ship in the Madness Combat fandom is Sandmos, the ship between Sanford and Deimos. While Madness Combat is a series with very little character focus and no dialogue, it is still easy to tell that Sanford and Deimos care about each other. Fans can easily pick up on their dynamic and their teamwork through little things like the physical ways they interact and how well they work in sync. And this was especially aided by Project Nexus, a game that does actually have dialogue. Sanford and Deimos are always seen together, or, well, were always seen together. So it is safe to say that they have a good relationship and bond, so shipping them together was an obvious conclusion to many fans. The second most popular ship in the fandom is To Be Hank, the ship between Hank J. Wimbledon and To Be Damned, aka Doc. Though these two have yet to actually interact in the main canon of the episodes, they have an implied history that many find interesting. Doc's focus episode, Dissenter, ends with an implication that he and Hank used to live together. Though, in comparison to Sanford and Deimos, people often portray Hank and Doc as bitter exes. While Sandmos gets all the tragic angst, To Be Hank gets all the dramatic angst. Not to mention the fact that the creator of Madness Combat, Crinkles, has definitely enabled the ship.
You know, if anyone knew about Hank's secret soft side, it'd be Doc. Given the time he spends stitching him back together.
Of course, Madness Combat has a few other ships, such as ships involving Jeb, the Sheriff, the Auditor, or Phobos, but Sandmos and To Be Hank are the ships that appear most frequently in the fandom for obvious reasons. These are cases, however, where the character dynamics and story allowed for a popular ship to exist between characters with canon interactions. Not every fandom has this happen. In the case of series like Spooky Month, the shipping scene struggled for a little bit to find the main ship. Spooky Month is a franchise with a decently sized cast, but very few characters interact with each other on screen. Not to mention the fact that there are a limited number of scenes in the series that aren't from the perspective of Skid and Pump, so we rarely see the standard lives of the supporting cast. This meant that a majority of the ships in the fandom were between characters who barely interact. There were ships like Smoky Donuts and Golden Lavender that were ships between characters with clear history. Smoky Donuts is the ship between the two police officers, John and Jack, characters who are basically never seen apart, and Golden Lavender is the ship between Leela and her childhood friend June, and it is quite common for characters who are best friends to be shipped in fandoms. But while both these ships are popular, they weren't as widespread across the whole fandom. It wasn't until the episode Tender Treats where the fandom's cornerstone ship would be established. That ship is Candy Bats. Candy Bats is the ship between Kevin, one of the show's main characters, and Streber, a background character who is implied to have died. Now, if you know nothing about Spooky Month, I can imagine this explanation would be a bit confusing. You may be wondering why the ship got so popular. Well, for starters, it was briefly believed to be canon. In the background of one scene, there is writing on the wall that reads Kevin X Streber. This temporarily caused the fandom to freak out under the assumption that not only did Kevin potentially have a boyfriend, but that boyfriend might be dead now. Senior Palo later confirmed that this was just the result of a rogue background artist and thus not canon, but it did not stop Candy Bats from blowing up across the fandom. Despite these characters having not interacted at all, I think the ship makes sense. In my previous video about shipping, I pointed out that many ships crop up because the fans often default to shipping when they want a character to be happy. With this in mind, let's do a bit of character analysis. Kevin is the main and presumably only employee at the Candy Club, seeing as he is never with any coworkers, and the one time he had a coworker in Rick quit, so Kevin is truly on his own. He is implied to be tormented by anxiety and anger issues, he hates his job, and on top of that, he's constantly dealing with horrors he doesn't understand. He's been stabbed by a possessed doll, almost attacked by a cannibal, and I don't even know how to define what happened to him in regards to the eyes. It's easy to see why fans would want to give him a break. And as for Strieber, well, the dude got attacked by a serial killer cannibal, and it's still unclear if he's actually alive, and if he is alive, it's been implied that his arm was ripped off, so yeah, fans want him to be happy. Many fans also use candy bats to experiment with headcanons for both Kevin and Strieber, but primarily Strieber. Plus, the two have a very Sun x Moon type of dynamic, and that is a popular ship dynamic. I truly believe that even if the Kevin x Strieber Easter egg wasn't included in the episode, Kevin and Strieber would still be shipped, especially given the fact that it did not take long for Gothic Bats, the ship between Strieber and another background character named Ethan, to become a close second to Candy Bats as soon as the Strieber short was released, and it was confirmed that Strieber and Ethan were good friends. There is also the other few scattered ships involving Strieber, such as the ships with Radford and Rick, so Kevin would likely be considered regardless of the Easter egg. And speaking of Radford and Rick, let's talk about them for a bit. Rick is a character who, to put it bluntly, seems pretty depressed. He is constantly frowning and speaking in a monotone voice, his main gimmick is that he switches jobs every episode, and he seems to hate them all. He also has my favorite line in the entire series.
I sold some kids beer because I'm tired of breathing.
But regardless, much like Kevin and Strieber, people wish to see Rick actually happy for once, which is where Radford comes in. Radford is Rick's co-worker in Deadly Smiles, and he also has very little screen time like Strieber, but that still did not stop fans from getting attached to him, though to a lesser extent, likely because Radford does not have the angst factor that Strieber does. Either way, because Radford's first scene in the show so far was with Rick, the main character Rick is shipped with is Radford, thus creating bitter popcorn. While not as popular as Candy Bats, bitter popcorn is still decently popular. It is undoubtedly the most popular ship for Radford and Rick, though those two have gained a few more ships over time, such as ships with Strieber, Kevin, or Ethan. In some cases, fans use shipping as a vessel to explore characters in a way the actual story didn't. An example of this would be Total Drama. Now, Total Drama often used romantic drama to raise the stakes, but rarely was it actually compelling. The very few romantic pairings that actually lasted longer than one season were simply put not that interesting, and many fans were frustrated because the show would often dedicate a lot of time to certain relationships only to have them later break up in a completely ridiculous way. Some of the most popular ships in the fandom are ships that are technically not canon because of this. Examples include Gwen x Trent, Harold x Lashana, Owen x Izzy, and most notably, Duncan x Courtney. All of these ships received underwhelming conclusions, and it is unlikely that they will ever get satisfying endings, unfortunately. To quote my friend, Total Drama is a show that encourages you to ship the characters, but they fuck it up every time. But despite all that, these ships are easily some of the most notable in the fandom. Even though many of these ships had really annoying on-screen breakups, or never even got together in the case of Harold and Lashana, they remain the most popular ships in the franchise, and that is largely because people still enjoy everything that happened with these relationships prior to their breakups. Now, to be entirely fair, Total Drama is meant to have a lot of character drama, it's in the name, and relationship drama is very easy to write. However, what's interesting is that I've noticed the fandom for Total Drama doesn't really like the drama, mainly because the drama is kind of poorly written. Most fan content regarding Total Drama focuses on the characters and their genuine interpersonal relationships. That is the element of the franchise that people find so interesting, especially considering the contestants constantly go through hell. The idea that they got something positive out of the show is really sweet. So it really doesn't surprise me that shipping is quite a major factor of the fandom. But it is also common for fans to ship characters who had no implications of romance at all. Especially in a franchise with so many characters, fans often use shipping to give certain characters more of a spotlight. Easily the biggest example of this in the fandom is Noah and Cody, the ship name being Noko. Now, this primarily gained popularity due to that one scene in episode 3, but I do think there is a reason it became so popular and continues to be a popular ship to this day. If I had to guess, I think this might be another situation similar to Strieber from Spooky Month. Both Cody and Noah are eliminated early in Island, don't compete in action, and then get much more character development in World Tour. But their personalities are significantly less developed compared to the other characters. While that is done somewhat on purpose, it does create room for fans to project headcanons onto the two of them, and I have noticed that these two are pretty popular characters in the fandom, and considering I don't see a lot of love for Noah's canon love interest, I'm not surprised Noko is so prominent. Speaking of horrible televised death games, Danganronpa! This is a franchise that also has a large shipping scene due to a desire for character exploration. For those who don't know, the general plot of Danganronpa revolves around the killing games in which characters' only chance of leaving the location they're trapped in is by killing one of the other students. As such, there's a lot of character development and character relationships that get cut short due to characters dying. While the character deaths that directly involve the emotional reactions of the rest of the cast are easily the most memorable, they are also sad for fans who wish to see their relationships develop. Thus, fanon content. And what did I say earlier about fans and shipping? Shipping is a common default for those who want to see characters happy, and considering the entire plot of the games revolve around characters dying, there are a lot of characters who fans want to see happy. Some of the most popular ships in the fandom are ones that revolve around one character's death and the other character's reaction, such as Ishimando or Sandam. But there are also a lot of ships between characters who could have had interesting relationships, however they were never really developed, such as Celeste Geary or Band-Aid. But also, an important element of Danganronpa shipping specifically is imagining the characters living happily outside the killing game. While angst is obviously a component of Danganronpa shipping, a lot of people like to place the characters in more wholesome situations, given that the entire story is about death and despair. I think this is why a lot of fans really like the board game side mode in V3, because it is basically a fluff fanfiction writer's dream. An entire side mode dedicated to simple, cutesy interactions between characters from all three main games in a scenario where they actually got to have normal school lives. Considering the actual story of Danganronpa, this was a really fun hypothetical, and of course it aided in the creation of many ships. Similar to Total Drama, a franchise that very much played with a variety of ships, Homestuck also played with a lot of possible ships, resulting in a plethora of rare pairs and crack ships. And now, those who know anything about Homestuck are probably fearful right now considering the topic of this video, so I will be brief. Homestuck is unique due to it having 4 different ways to ship the characters in-universe. These are called quadrants. I will not be explaining them. But due to the different contexts these quadrants have, it isn't enough to just say you ship 2 characters, because there are technically 4 different ways to ship the characters. Now, most people stick to the quadrant that most resembles regular human romance, as it is the most recognizable, but I can imagine how interesting it is to have 4 different contexts to imagine these relationships in. And considering these quadrants are important to the characters in the story, it is something that fans often think about. It adds a lot of layers to the content and dynamics of the ship, allowing for a whole new kind of shipping. And since shipping is by nature about imagination, it is fun to have these options to mess around with, even if they are a nightmare to actually explain. Sometimes a non-canon ship is favored in fandom because the ship is preferred in comparison to the canon ships. An example of this would be Star vs. the Forces of Evil. Star vs. the Forces of Evil was an interesting case. Basically, since the beginning of the show, Star and Marco getting together as a couple was a possibility that loomed over the show in a threatening way. They were great together as friends, and many people hoped it would stay that way, especially given the fact that at the start of the show, Marco had someone else he was pining after. Then the Blood Moon curse happened and everything went downhill. This was the moment that cemented Starco as endgame, but the writers dragged it out to a ridiculous degree. Throughout the show's life, the characters would enter and break off various romantic relationships and have hints planted with various other characters, all while the Blood Moon ominously hung over everyone's heads. In a sense, it didn't matter what any of the characters did because the Blood Moon curse was still around, and even after they broke the curse, Starco was still endgame, despite the fact that basically no one was invested in the ship anymore, not even Starco shippers. This also isn't touching on the fact that many Starco moments were really weird and honestly kind of uncomfortable. Starco is often considered one of the elements that made the show's finale unsatisfying, though it is far from the only element. Honestly, it's been like 4 years. I still don't understand what they were thinking. Okay, I get what they were trying to do, but it did not pay off, and I had to be told by a completely separate person that the magic destruction thing was apparently planned from the beginning. There was no way I would have picked up on that otherwise, and why would you end it this way? Though that is a whole other story. Regardless, it is common for fans to prefer ships such as Jarko, Jackie and Marco, or Tomko, Tom and Marco, rather than Starco. In some cases, a ship might not be explicitly canon, but fans might feel like there is so much subtext that the ship just kind of makes sense. An example of this would be Mato Homu, and to a lesser extent Kiyosaya, both from Madoka Magica. Now, technically neither of these ships are canon due to a variety of reasons, but I would say fans have a pretty good set of evidence that there is at least romantic subtext between these two duos. Kiyosaya is a bit more subtle, but there is so much official art and symbolism shared between the two, and they also parallel each other so wonderfully, it makes sense why the ship is so popular. As for Mato Homu, Homura subjected herself to hundreds of time loops and literally became the devil just to keep Madoka safe. It really is not hard to see why fans think she has romantic feelings for Madoka. There are many fans who don't necessarily ship the two, but still agree that there is absolutely subtext. Plus, both ships are from Madoka Magica, meaning the angst factor is at 100%. However, in a lot of cases, non-canon ships exist just for the fun of it. Rather than having a deep character analysis made to justify the ship, some fans just ship certain pairings because they can. This is basically the case for most polyamory ships in fandom. There is an extremely limited pool of fictional polyamorous characters or couples, and considering ship wars used to be an extremely common source of debate in fandoms, a lot of people just decide to ship multiple characters in one relationship. Polyamory in fandoms is basically a huge middle finger to the idea that there can only be one ship for a character, because that character can just date multiple other characters. Of course, this isn't to say that polyamorous ships lack deep character analysis. Rather, I just tend to see polyamory used as a way to avoid shipping discourse. For example, if a character has a canonical partner, but fans ship the character primarily with someone else, it is not uncommon to see fan art of those three characters together in a poly relationship. And I guess at the end of the day, that really is what determines why people like certain ships, for the fun of it. Shipping is, for a lot of people, a comfort thing. We ship characters because we enjoy their stories, dynamics, and potential. We make content for this ship, be that fan art, fanfiction, headcanons, playlists, or more, because it makes us happy. If we stuck only to ships we knew without a doubt would be canon, our shipping options would be vastly reduced. So why limit ourselves like that? One of the best parts of fanon is the fact that there really is no endpoint for what your imagination can come up with. Some of the best, most high-effort, high-quality pieces of fan content are the ones very much separated from the canon. The passion combined with a lack of restrictions means fans can create whatever they want. The same applies to shipping. Fanon is all about twisting the canon to your interest in creating something that makes you happy. So, who cares if the ship will never actually be canon? It's canon in your heart, and that is all that matters.